Hi there, welcome to another element training video. We're going to take a look at editing cues. We're going to do that by using Blind Spreadsheet, which we'll take a look at here in just a second. And we're going to take a look at tracking versus cue only and how that will impact your editing process, as well as live and the difference between live and blind. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go into blind mode. I already have a small show recorded. You'll notice we have 8 cues, channels across the top, and their associated levels running with the cues. So this is a real simple show. We just have three channels and a couple of different level changes. So by its nature, Element out of the box, the default mode, Element is going to be a tracking style desk. And what that means is when you start to do your editing, it'll impact some of the ways you may be used to working. A tracking style console means that it's going to only record changes. So you'll notice that channel 1 goes to 50% in Q1 and then stays at 50. We're going to go to Q3. And on channel 1, we're going to change that level to 70%. And when we hit enter, all of the subsequent cues, 4 through 8, all go to 70. That's the nature of a tracking style desk, is that it records, it sets the change, and then just allows that change to follow through. Now, that's great in certain situations, but there are times when you may want to make a change in only one cue. So Q6, for instance, if I want to take 70 back down to 50%, how do I accomplish that? Because if I simply put Q6, if I simply put 50 enter, then 7 and 8 will also change. The way we do that is we select channel 1 at 50, and before we hit enter, we use the Cue Only Track button here on the right, and we hit Cue Only because we're in tracking mode, so the default will then flip to Cue Only, and we hit enter. And when we do that, the change occurs only in Q6, and 7 and 8 stay at the level of 70. So this is a really helpful way to edit an individual cue. Now, if you're coming from Element from an Express or Expression background, you're going to be used to working with a desk that by default works in a cue-only mode. And it's possible to put the element into cue-only mode to more closely emulate that by selecting the Setup button. The console may come up directly into this screen, or it may come up in the show setting. Use S1 or S2, or the mouse. Use S2, and we'll come back over to the desk settings. And under Record Defaults, you'll see the track button. Right now we're in tracking mode. We click it and it changes to cue only. We'll come back to blind. And what that means in terms of our changes are, now we'll only make changes in the cue that we've decided to edit. So for our example, let's go to Q4 and we'll select channel 1 again. Right now it's at 70% with channel 5, Q5 also at 70. We're going to make it 80. Channel 1 at 80, and we hit enter. Q4 channel 1 changes to 80. Channel Q5 stays the same, and that's what putting it into cue only mode will do. Again, coming from Expression, that may make the desk a little more comfortable for you to work with. However, I would like to stress that, or mention that, if you're going to be adding in moving lights or color scrollers or LEDs, anything like that that's a little more complicated, you're going to find out that working in tracking mode is actually a little easier and will make editing and working with those devices a smoother process. So we're going to switch back into tracking mode, and we're going to come back to blind. And one more quick example of even working with conventionals. If, for instance, I want to add a special into this entire cue, or I just need to add a little more light into an area, channel 4, I'm going to put in at 80%. And when I hit enter, channel 4 has now been added into all of the cues. That's the power of tracking. I don't have to go into each individual cue to make those changes. So that's kind of the difference between cue only and tracking. If you want a little more information on this, we have a really fun video on our website called Why Did My Console Do That?, which gives you a little history about tracking and what's referred to as a preset style desk. So that might also be helpful. So let's take a look at what's the difference between editing in live versus editing in blind. Well, we've been editing in blind, and you've probably noticed that when we make a change, we simply hit enter, and the change happens immediately. If we come back to live mode for a moment, and we're going to go in a couple of queues, so we're looking at some levels. We'll come back down to Q4. We'll let that finish out. So channel 1 has our level of 80. These other levels have tracked in. So if I want to change channel 4 now to another level, if I go 4 at 50, maybe it's a little too bright. When I hit enter, Q4 has not been changed, and I know I'm in Q4 from down here. I've only made it a live edit. What I want to do now is I want to update the queue. I can do that in two ways. I can either re-record the queue, or I can simply use the update button. If I say update, enter, Q4 now has the change of going to 50%. But I have to tell it what I'm going to do. I have to do the update or a new record. The difference between update and record is update will update the source material, meaning that if I have built the queue using submasters, that when I do that update, the submasters will actually be updated. If I've worked with things that we're going to take a look at a little later for moving lights, palettes or whatnot, it'll update those as well. When I do a record takes a snapshot of the entire stage, and then records it into the queue. So in this case, let's make one more change. We'll go 2 at 80. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do a new record of Q4. So record, and we're going to tell it to overwrite Q4 instead of a new queue. And please confirm and enter. And I've made the edit to Q4 by making that change. So that's kind of the difference between update and record. And that is an overview of editing queues.